Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Daily Muppet. Obviously, yesterday's video, the vlog, the live walking around, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of things, quite a bit of crazy, and perhaps not the best by way of, clarity. And first and foremost, in terms of what was really going on. And it was really interesting to see the discourse and around Ruben's press conference and some of the things he said and some of the feelings around there. I'll be honest and say I was quite surprised. And it was very much an eye-opening experience for me in looking at, sitting there in the room listening to the questions, the conversation, the body language, all the things that go into it, which you can see on the cameras, to be clear. But I think when for the most people aren't watching the whole press conference start to finish live, the way that it's videoed, the way that it's done. In fact, I think during the season, oftentimes you don't even get the opportunity to do that. Sometimes it's published, sometimes it isn't that way. But I was really surprised and quite a bit taken aback by some of the things that people were thinking, and it continues to bring me back to this whole point that I've been talking about for the last few weeks, of where I feel like there is, for some reason, like this underlying need to turn anything into a negative. And I just don't see things that way. And I'm not going to really see things that way, because I genuinely and honestly believe quite the opposite of that. And I think things are actually quite on their way back up. It's not an act. I'm not doing it because it suits some purpose or any of that. You guys know, I know, everybody can see outrage and negativity sells a lot better. I wish it didn't, but it does. And I'm not saying that everybody who's negative, I'm not saying everybody who has, who's just taking things the wrong way, everybody who's jaded is doing so out of some nefarious thing. I'm not like that at all. It's certainly well acceptable for people to feel that way. But when things are so very, it's easy to see as well how it gets that way. And now it makes me wonder, like I think about Ruben Amorim talking about things like suffering last season, and I think about that and I think, did I understand it even? Or did I even get wrapped up in some of the same stuff? Has this happened before? Have I been? And anyway, it's just the whole thing makes me look at things from a different perspective of, when you're just reading a quote and you're reading a thing, not really getting into it. But I wanted to summarize, do a brief video here so I won't yap too long. 15, 20 minutes. That's it. I promise. I hope. Because it's early. I'm about to get on a plane, or I'm about to go to the airport and get on a plane. It's the middle of the night, actually. And I'm going to be on a plane, and yeah. So I've got, like, it's lit up from this lamp in front of me in the TV. I'm going to be getting on a plane going to New York soon, but I wanted to publish this because I was thinking, for me, for you, get all my thoughts down in a cohesive fashion. So let's get right into it. And I haven't done a ton of videos, obviously a lot of lives and things like that. The one walking around the street was pretty chaotic, so maybe not all totally clear. When it comes to outgoings, I wanted to speak about outgoings. Obviously there was a lot of talk in the press conference about outgoings, and I think that Ruben Amorim's kind of strategy there, I'll get to that in a minute in his comments and his feelings, but the outgoings are, as of right now, the biggest factor, the biggest holdup in any sort of move that United can make in the market. They need to sell. They are focused on selling. It's not just a line. It is something that's got to happen, that they're trying to do, that they need to do, and that is really important towards the next step in the window. And right now there's progress. One of the things it's really true that there's interest from multiple clubs, for example, in Garnacho in the Premier League. And Aston Villa, Chelsea, they're interested. They've expressed that to United. There are other clubs outside of there. One of the things that United and Amorim want these players to accept is that, how would I put this? They want them to accept moves that are maybe not in their ideal wheelhouse. Like Anthony been waiting for Batiste this whole time. Now we're starting to see rumors that he's considering others. Well, the same needs to happen for Garnacho. I said this at the start of the window. I said Garnacho's going to get stuck, potentially, unless he opens his eyes a bit and has a bit of a wake-up call. Like, teams are going to wait Teams are going to price down, and if he doesn't want to go outside the Premier League, his options are going to be fairly limited and not even that certain. Because when you look at the situations of guys like Aston Villa and guys like Chelsea, well, they may not value him at the value he thinks he's at, and at the value United would let him go for. And if they don't, then United will keep him, and he will not play because he's going to have to compete. And that's the point there. And he's going to have to beat competition, and these players are significantly better than him, not just in their application, but their attitude and things like that too. But one of the things that Amorim did in terms of pressuring these players, and this is kind of a mix of the outgoings and the Amorim section, is by saying they can return, it's almost worse for them, because he's saying, look, if you get how he put it as these players wanted to explore different moves. That's how he said it. They wanted to explore different moves. We're giving them time to. So if they want to stay, if they don't get that move at the end of it, they can stay. And that tells clubs that they can stay. And he's telling the players that they can stay. But he's stressing as well, if you listen to what he says, the importance of the fact that they have a lot of competition now. That they have really good players now. That they have proven players now. That they have players whose attitudes match more what he wants. That have character that matches more what he wants. And essentially that's putting it to the player and saying, you can stay. You can compete for your place. And I would bet Ruben knows they're going to bottle that, those players. Because he knows they don't want the competition. That's why they want to leave in the first place. He knows they don't feel they're up for it truthfully. And that's why they don't want to stay in the first place. That's the truth of the matter. The little underlying thing here, when you look at the situation with Garnacho, why does he want to leave? Well, the reason he wanted to leave originally and the reason he got upset this time is because he didn't play. It means he doesn't feel confident that he can convince the manager he's the right guy. Amorim knows that. That's why he said what he said to him. And so by saying, which I believe he means it, if you stay, if you're here at the end of the window, then you'll play, you'll be in the team rather, and then we'll see what happens. You compete for your place. I think he knows they're going to look at that and say, it tells clubs they're willing to stay, it tells the players they can stay, but from the players' perspective, they're going to go, shit, that's not good. They won't think they're going to compete. They won't think they can get a place in the team, and that should push them to accept potentially other moves away, multiple options out there. And obviously, this is just a big factor in the whole strategy, because while there's options with Garnacho that pertain to the striker and things we'll get in a second. At the same time, if someone like Garnacho could be sold anywhere, it would help United a lot move in the window in what they wanted to do if it wasn't contingent on needing this like swap thing to work with Garnacho. If they could sell Antony instead of this complex shit loan, weird structured deal to Betis, and they could actually get him off the books right away and get that value back, it would help them a lot more. You know what I mean? These types of things. Jadon Sancho, I don't even know at this point, but similar type of story there. Ruben Amorim, Ruben Amorim, his whole thing here is, you can see in the way that he talks, big focus on character, big focus on players who've done it, big focus on players who've accomplished what they need to accomplish, big focus on experience and players who can come in and make a difference, and a big focus on the guys who are willing to be a part of the team. He said that many times. I'll touch on that again in the suffering section. I'll touch on that as well. His focus on players who are willing to be a part of the team, who are willing to work together, and who fit the dynamics that he wants is most important. But he's certainly, I think, very confident in what's going on. I said before, I don't think, people are saying, oh, Amorim, he's being hung out to dry, he's this, he's that. I said before, he's not, and he won't feel that way, and I don't think he does. Now, was he certainly fairly insistent that they get Mbeumo in for training and wanting that in, so he had just two forwards in there? 100%. Absolutely. Absolutely he was. because and I'll touch on this in the video I put on the wingback side of it. A lot of the criticisms of Amorim and his inflexibility tactically and things like that, a lot of times come down to the fact that he can't. What he wants to be able to do is lay down a baseline of players and personnel, and say this is the way we want to play. And then he wants to have competition, and he wants to have players that have slightly different strengths, different attributes, different characteristics. Because the fact is, most players, most managers, they don't, they change the game by changing the players. This player has this attribute, this player has this characteristic. Let me use them, and that's going to change the game. If I put him in this position, it's going to make us play this way. If I put him in this position, it's going to... Think about that with Ahmad as an example, as I used in the wingback video. You put Ahmad at 10 versus Ahmad at wingback. Same manager, same tactics, different outcome in terms of how the team is going to play. So Amorim's pretty strongly wanted them to get some really solid players with certain characteristics he felt were lacking from the team that don't allow him to do certain things. But this is where he, I think, can be very, very flexible and will be very, very flexible with the right options. Obviously, if you can get a striker in, which he wants, it's even better. But certainly, this is where he can be very, very flexible. One of the things that I also find was interesting here is his comments on Kobbie Mainoo and Bruno Fernandes and how he sees them. He sees them as players who he wants them to get on the ball, keep things moving, ticking, talking about them in a bit more of the context of a deeper role with Kobbie Mainoo as well as Bruno. And definitely offering some explanation for why have Bruno deeper rather than further forward. And I think a part of that is simply that, as he was kind of explaining, when Bruno was up, then he's got to get on the ball, and that vacates the space in front. So it's better to have him deeper to get on the ball and have runners in front of him. And that makes sense. That logically makes a lot of sense. I get that, even though I've even myself personally thought, I think he's better as a 10. Maybe he's not. We'll see. But I get his logic on this. But he wants Bruno near the ball, and he wants Kobbie near the ball. And it was interesting as well. He continues to kind of indicate, look, Kobbie needs to just speed up a little bit, do things quicker, faster. And this is why, this kind of athletic midfielder, I think he really likes the idea of Kobbie deeper, alternating with Bruno and such. But I also think he feels that, again, there's just, you take Ugarte as one option. There's really nobody else who even comes close in terms of ground coverage. There's nobody to rotate, nobody to play. If Ugarte is not playing well, there's nobody to do that. And that's why that position is so of need to him. And I thought it was a little bit of a hint of that when, again, he was even talking about Kobbie saying needs to speed up. He obviously wants more pace, more energy, more running, doing things quicker, doing things faster in the midfield to improve the rhythm, the speed of action and all of that. So he's got some clear ideas. I think he's going to end up being a lot more flexible than people think once he can, lay the foundations and get the things in place he wants, which I think we're heading towards. And people will find it very, very different. But certainly a huge focus this summer is on fixing the togetherness of the team, the psyche of the team, the emotional state of the team, the mental aspects of a team, of everybody being together and on the same page is certainly a part of, what he is trying to do and all of that. Speaking of striker, because obviously wants a striker, yes, I did look into this a bit more, as I said I would. And again, my understanding is, I wish I had something super new to share here, but I can say it with certainty at least, that in an ideal world here, United are observing, looking at, and still very strongly considering the situation with Alejandro Garnacho, Aston Villa, and Chelsea, Nicholas Jackson, and Ollie Watkins. Because they have this sort of perfect circumstance where they like both of the players at these clubs, and both clubs like Garnacho. Now, I think Garnacho needs to, I said before that he might be holding off on other moves and things like that as long as Chelsea's still on the table. The problem we have at the moment is that the valuations of these players don't necessarily match in a way that works for United. So if Chelsea are saying, oh, well, Jackson 70, 80 million, and Garnacho, we only value him at 30, 40, well, United don't want to do that deal necessarily at those kind of stretch in values. If they were closer, I think they'd be much more willing to do so because they are interested and they know that Chelsea are interested. So they don't want Chelsea sitting there with a player that they're trying to sell and try to hold United at ransom and claim that their player is not for sale, but United's is, and so they should get a much better deal. They don't want to let them kind of do that. But at the same time, there needs to be alternatives. And if Garnacho is holding on just for a move to Chelsea, then it's tough for there to be, any kind of alternatives. And that's part of this whole kind of strategy as well of the push of like, okay, well, if you're going to hold out, well, we've got a number. Omar and Jason, they've got a number. Now, I believe that number is 50 million or so, maybe a little bit higher than that, but right around there. And I think that would be a good number, but I think they are serious about potentially not letting go for less than that unless the value on the other side moves significantly in the direction where the gap is very, very close. So they need Garnacho to be willing, and if that number isn't met, then he won't go. And so he's got to push and say, look, I'm not going to be relaxed and calm and say, yeah, one of these clubs will come get me at the end of the window and we'll make it easy, and I'm going to follow that strategy, because the clubs that he's talking to will be recommending that. Just sit tight, wait to the end of the window, we'll let the price comes down. He's got to be urging them, saying, I need to move now. I need to move now. I need this now. And that's part of the strategy there as well. So ideal world here, and the best scenario, the one that they're still working through, and this is part of the game. They need those values to come up from Aston Villa and Chelsea on Alejandro Garnacho. This is just my inkling, is that there's potentially a better deal to be done with Villa, but at the same time, maybe Garnacho's not so as keen on it. I don't know. That's just my speculation, and so they need him to be more open. At the same time, if he was willing to join other clubs, and that's part of, again, the same strategy, then they would have the money to not have to deal with the same exact situation, right? It's an easier, even though there's an opportunity here where both clubs want Garnacho, if they're able to get 55 million for him somewhere else, then they can go to Chelsea, go to Villa, and say, okay, well, 50 million for Watkins, 50 million for Jackson, who's taking, you know what I mean? And actually negotiate on multiple targets that they'd be quite happy with. 40 million to Mateta over at Palace. Like, they could make offers, they could do work on multiple fronts on these deals seriously, because it's not contingent on this Garnacho swap type of valuation to make a deal in that sense. Because there's also potentially the idea that those clubs would do a better deal if it wasn't about Garnacho, you know what I mean? So that is a serious one topic. They really do want a striker, and it is about the money. They've got to raise some. Garnacho in that situation being the obvious, but they want to get a good one. That is the ideal plan. So I'm not as of yet turning to, well, who could we get as that stopgap? Because from my understanding, they certainly are still idealizing going for getting a striker they rate really highly, and that would be the idea. Okay, they want to, be smart with the signings, not necessarily do stopgaps in these permanent signings, not do stopgaps. So I think that that's still a key part of this. Now, this strategy applies to Antony and such as well. If Antony comes back and he knows he's not going to play because he can't compete for his position, because now he's against Ahmad and he's against Mbumo and he's against Dallo and he's not going to play, well, then he's got to not sit there and say, well, I want Batiste only, while the Batiste president is playing games. Be open. Now, there's some quotes this evening or last night saying he might be open to other places. There's some reports saying he might be open to Saudi, that there's other clubs interested, and that maybe his options are opening because Batiste is becoming unlikely. We'll see about that, but that's a serious way that, United could get a significant amount of funds, as well as if there's a good offer from elsewhere and he's actually willing to take it. And so that's as well part of this strategy. And I think either one of those could help United have a little bit of money after the Marcus Rashford deal, but not enough. And so all of these ones help. And depending on the deal, the better the deal, the better it is. But if it's super late in the window, then it's not going to help much. When it comes to goalkeeper, same kind of story here. United want a goalkeeper, but they're full-on goalkeepers. Onana, Bayindir, Tom Heaton. Now, Tom Heaton is sort of irrelevant to this in a sense, because they always needed that older, like, homegrown player on the register, and they wouldn't want three real, like, fully established senior keepers on long-term contracts anyways. But they need to move a keeper on. It's a little bit less about, like, the exactness of the money here, and, like, paying a bunch of players to do nothing, which is not what they want to do. They want they want to shed some weight. Now, the loan offer for Emi Martinez, essentially because that's something that wouldn't have been permanent. Look at it and say we could bring someone in temporarily, gives us time to find a move, puts pressure on players to go, and all of that. But moving for a permanent keeper, a little bit more difficult. They're going to need to move someone on for that, and it's probably not going to be Onana. From what I hear, certainly nothing's really changed on that front, and it's very likely that he's going to stay through the end of the window. There's really little sign of him leaving at all, and it is viewed as extremely unlikely at this point that he leaves in this window. Tom Heaton obviously won't. There's not necessarily concrete interest in Bayindir at this point in time. So I'm hoping this can somewhat accelerate here, but United have had conversations on the keeper front. They've had conversations with a couple people. We kind of know the names, and they're kind of prepared to do something, but they need to make some space and see what kind of options can present themselves, especially for Bayindir to move someone on. Then I just want to address this point on the suffering. Ruben Amorim talking about how, again, kind of sort of commenting like, of course we will suffer, of course that's going to happen. Of course there's going to be a little bit suffering. But at the same time, like, it's really taken strongly, I believe, out of context of the whole conversation. Ruben Amorim was really explicitly talking about in his video, in his press conference rather, about the togetherness of the team, the changes that have been going on. I spoke about this in my video, and this is one of the things that's been happening. There's so many changes over the last year, and so much chaos, and so many things, and so many moving pieces. It's settled now. And he's spoken a lot about rebuilding the environment, the culture, the connectedness of everybody, the things like that. And, what he's really kind of doing here is saying, when he made that comment, he was talking about like the fact that, of course, it's not always going to be easy. And he was talking about how the players chose to join United, Cunha and Bumo, these guys, they chose to join United even despite the difficulties we've had, even despite the situation we've had, even despite Champions League. And so the point he was making here is that these are players, these are people, these are guys joining who can deal with the pressure, can deal with the circumstances of United and where we're at, and want to fight through it and work through it. And he was also talking about the fact that there's a togetherness that we didn't have before. So while in the past it was like figuring it all out, the environment's not great, the culture's not great, the squad has these fractures and things like that in there, we've cleaned it, we're fixing it, the bond is there, we're getting the right personalities in, the right characters, the right individuals. That's how they feel. So when the tough gets, they stick together. When inevitably there are things that are hard, you suffer. Someone gets injured, we have a couple bad games, some certain things are struggling, that they stick together and that they fight for each other, and they fight for the club, and they fight for him, and they fight as a group, and that they are all pushing as one in the same direction, and that bond is there that was not there before. And so, what he was really talking about is like, obviously everything's not going to be smooth sailing every second of the day, but it was taken in more of the context of now we have a foundation that can carry us through those difficult moments to come out the other side even better, that we didn't have before, where it was like, things are going to be rough, and we're just separating the wheat from the chaff, and we're going through it, the really shit. And now we've gone through that. And obviously doesn't mean it's all going to be easy at the end of it, but now there's a foundation in place that is there. And that's how he feels. And he believes that. And that's what he was talking about. He wasn't sitting there and saying, we're going to be crap for another. We're not going to sit there and be crap for a whole nother season, and the play is going to be terrible and all of that. In addition, a little thing, I don't know if anybody caught this on MUTV, but they were talking about how they saw the tactical sessions the other day. And, there's some interesting things in there, apparently. Some things we haven't seen before. Maybe some split strikers, maybe something like that. Anyway, I'm investigating, so we'll find out. But He also spoke in the press conference about the flexibility in the competition, the flexibility of different positions for guys like Cunha. So maybe we will. Maybe we'll see a split striker, Cunha and Bumo on Saturday night here in the first game. We'll see. I'll find out more about that. But there you go. Just a better little concise summary of the situation on everything. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate you all very much. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. We'll be doing a vlog today. I'll do a live from the stadium as well. And for any of you in New York, I will see you there, likely in the tailgate and things as well. Okay? Have a good one, everyone. See you later. Thank you.